Here we are at the corner of 34th and Highland Place in Cleveland Park. As you see, there is no street on that side of the road. Highland Place doesn't exist there. It's only on this side of the road. And at first, Highland Place looks kind of like an alley. An alley has a couple of houses tucked into it. It's the closest thing to, I've now forgotten what the name of the street is, but the street in Armistead Maupin's novels. It's like the quirky little side street. This is kind of like the quirky little side street in Cleveland Park. Except it is true that the first house on it is this massive house. Except this house is not massive by Highland Place standards. It's only massive when you compare it to the other houses on this little end. I actually know at least one person who lives in Highland Place. I knew one of the people who lives in one of these two houses, the only two non-detached houses on the street. They're semi-detached. One, of course, belongs to a realtor. Is a friend of mine. I've actually house at that house when they went to another country. Here are the houses on this side, which again you can see why I might think of an Armistead Maupin novel. I'm not sure that was always painted that blue. I don't know what this little guy's doing. He's probably going to ask me who I am, and I'm going to tell him it's none of his business. Anyway, my realtor friend bought, of course, one of the two houses. There's semi-detached on a street of big houses. So I guess she was thinking ahead. So she's sort of buying the cheapest house on a street full of big houses. Anyway, almost all the houses here on Highland Place and also on Newark, which is one block south of us, have gigantic front porches. The other thing that's interesting about them is that we're only about 3 blocks from the Cleveland Park Metro. You would never think that we're on top of a subway here and a major movie theater and a bunch of restaurants, but we are. They're all a couple blocks down, and then you go down a little path through the woods. But on the way you get to look at all these beautiful houses. I think the power lesbian couple, when they were still a couple, Hillary Rosen and Elizabeth Birch, rented a house here when Elizabeth Birch first ran the Human Rights Campaign. And I think there's some anchor or journalist at CNN who owns a house on the block. You can see how they're getting more and more fantastic. She owns a house on the block and rents it out. And she sort of owns it. It's sort of her anchor to the United States, even though she's technically Cuban, or her mother's Cuban, but she's here so she can access American health care. It's all kind of confusing. Every once in a while there's something modern thrown in the mix like this, which is pretty typical for Cleveland Park. Now, the other thing there is in Cleveland Park is one of the most exclusive DC private elementary schools. And bizarrely enough, although maybe this fits in with DC and the world of technocrats and overly credentialed social scientists, not this lovely Queen Anne house, and that is what most of the architecture is here. It's called Queen Anne architecture. And these houses would all be $3 million and up now. They might even be like 6, 7, 8, just depending on how fantastic they are and how big their lots are and whether they have another building. My friend's little semi-detached house, the realtor, would not be that much. It would probably be 2. Anyway, this is these couple of streets are the areas in DC that have the most of what's called Queen Anne architecture. You can Google it in Wikipedia. It's very common in certain older towns in Canada. But in DC, there are just a couple of spots of it. And this is a great example. Queen Anne architecture has usually elaborate porches with elaborate woodwork. Anyway, here's the National Center for Child Research, which is one of the most exclusive private schools in DC. I think it's weird that it actually sounds like a lab that experiments on your children. The National Center for Child Research. And the neighbors have mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, if they actually have a kid who's old enough to go to the school and can get in, it's a great school and they can walk to school. But on the other hand, twice a day, I think we're already past that period today, and it is actually the summer, twice a day there is a huge traffic jam here as parents drive up, and it is mainly parents driving up. It's like World Bank people and White House people and attorneys driving their kids up and dropping them off at this school. This building is the schoolhouse. I have a friend whose child actually got into this school and went to it for several years. She didn't really like it. Her child got a set-aside slot because they set aside slots, and my friend who lives on the border of Georgetown and kind of comes from, she and her husband are kind of minor trust fund babies, although they both work. They got a slot here because at the National Center for Child Research, because their child was a preemie, and technically she was very slightly developmentally delayed, so a very pretty upper middle class blonde child got one of the slots for developmentally delayed kids, which is just how the National Center for Child Research wanted to do it. Although they do, of course, have a very demographically mixed group of students. Lots of upper middle class lawyers who are people of color get their children into the National Center for Child Research. This, which I think used to be painted purple and just sold recently, is a truly huge house that's just worth millions and millions because it has this huge, huge side lot. It belonged to, actually, another lesbian. There are two lesbian power couples on the street. This one is somebody who is very well divorced and has money from the Scripps Howard Foundation and owned this for many, many years. But when her child, I think, became 18, she sold it and moved away, and now I think has condos or something in New York and San Francisco. This may be the CNN rental. Oh, I'm going to run out of... No, I'm not going to run out. I'm trying to get to the end of the block, both because all the houses are interesting and the whole block is interesting, but also because another famous person on this block of Highland Place, well, there are two actually, Max Campbellman, who was a centrist ruling class foreign policy expert, owned a house here, but it's been sold now for about a decade, and he's moved away because he's older and he's retired. But also Greg Craig, however you pronounce his name, the lawyer who sent Elian Gonzalez back to Cuba, who was Bill Clinton's lawyer for a number of situations, also lives in, I think, this house. It's either this one or that one. I've actually walked by and seen him in shorts looking pretty good 10 years ago or so, working in his front yard, and he gave me a very excited and happy hello. And I don't think he's sold or moved away. Anyone who bought one of these houses, anytime before 2002 is basically sitting on a gold mine. Because back then they might have bought them for well under $1 million, and now something like that. I mean, this is like in the 5 to 9 range, just depending on how fantastic it is inside and what year it is. But these aren't like $2 million houses, and a lot of them aren't even $3 million houses anymore. They're more than that. And part of it's because we're so very close to downtown DC. This is about 20 blocks north of the White House. You go down Connecticut Avenue, eventually it peters out at 17th. The White House is over on 16th. This is about the 3500 block of Connecticut. And the White House is probably like the equivalent of about the 900 or 1000 block of Connecticut, so it's really not very far at all. This is actually plain for this neighborhood. This is the other possible Greg Craig house, but I think it was actually the yellow house. And they continue to be nice. Although, well, they're actually really nice ones around the corner on New York, too. I'm not committed to going down there.
This for Google?
No. I wish Google were paying me.
What is it?
Oh, just kind of for me. It's for our little real estate blog. But if Google hires me, I'll take it. Maybe I'll send it to Eric Schmidt.